Okay, this is Christine. Hey everybody, we are ready for a day 2 of Scrapbooking 101. I think we've got it all set up just right. Let me zoom in here a little bit for you. And we are going to be talking today about how you create the base of your scrapbook layout. What you do to get things started once you've picked your pictures, picked your papers. So I'm going to start very basic today, and then I'm going to get a little more complicated, and I'm actually going to walk you through fairly quickly how I would do 3 different layouts to start. So this first one, you can see I've got a set of pictures here, and I've got some patterned papers. I also have what we call a sketch, and you can find sketches all over Instagram, all over Pinterest, all over Facebook. I pulled out a couple today that I thought would work with my pictures. This one is from Creative Scrapbooker magazine. And then this is one from Sketch and Scrap. Lisa is one of the creative team members here at Paper House. And I actually ended up deciding that this one is the direction I'm going to go. And so what this does is it just gives you a jumping off point for where to even go and how to design your scrapbook layout. So I'm going to show you how I would start with this. First of all, I already have put my pictures on here. Now you can see right off the bat, they had vertical pictures. My pictures were horizontal, so I just made them work. The point is they go across your layout like this. So I'm going to then figure out what is going to go behind that. Now I know I want to have a white background. I know that I want to work with the basic colors of basketball. And so I pulled out these different patterned papers, and you can see how they coordinate. This one's actually from one of our baby collections. So that's kind of a funny one to include, but I like this graph. You can see that's a photoreal basketball page. That's got some good stars, and I love this sunburst. So what I am going to do is just figure out how to layer those. Now you can see this is a very uncomplicated sketch. It does not have a lot going on. And so really I could get away with going very uncomplicated if I wanted to. However, I really want to use this paper. So I'm going to work this in to my sketch. So I'm going to just pull out my paper trimmer, which is gigantic. And trim this down to get started. And I know that my height on this is 3.5 inches because I just cut it down. So I'm going to go ahead and make this 5 inches. And I want to include the starburst within it. So I'm going to just trim off some ends here. Trim off about the same amount. And then I'll work my way down to 5 inches. Okay, so that's good. And you can see on the sketch, they've got it right there centered. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this on there. Now, some days, like you saw yesterday, I create a whole background from stitching or from electronic cut files. More often than not, though, I create a background and my base from just patterned paper. So I'm going to just lightly center this on there. By lightly, I mean I'm not going to push down on the adhesive just yet, so I can double check if I've got it pretty evenly positioned. And I'm pretty close. Close enough that I'm satisfied with it. And I'm just going to double check that everything is straight. Okay, and so I've got that. I'm going to go ahead then and add my pictures. Today is really just about doing this initial base. It's not going to be about embellishing. It's not about where is she going with this. I like to have a plan for how I'm going to start my base, and then I dig into that, and then I just kind of roll with things as they go. So it doesn't, I have no idea where I'm going with this next, but I've created a very simple start to my layout, and then I can build from there. And as I have these patterned papers sitting out, I have ideas generating already. I have some ideas with this, I have some ideas with this, and so I'm just letting them kind of roll around in my brain as I'm creating the initial base. So there you have just a very simple start to a layout. Now, you can take that as far as you want. We'll see over the next couple days how far I go with this, or you can go very simple. Add a couple stickers, add a title, add some journaling, you're done. You can see it's already pleasing to the eye. You got multiple pictures on there, and it could work in a very simple way. It could also get really complicated and go even further. So we will continue on that one. Let's go to the next one. So this next one, I actually decided to print out a giant copy of the picture that I shared with you yesterday because there's so many kids in it. I wanted to get them all in there without having little teeny tiny faces. And I really only had one great picture from that day. And so that is why I went with a big picture. So what I decided to do is to use this paper. Like I said yesterday, I really like it. And I'm going to use that as my base. But I'm going to get crazy and actually cut this and this into a circle together. It'll make sense as I go. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use this black template as my guide. Now I could use a circle cutter to cut all this out, but I really hate cutting into pictures with a circle cutter. It's not a real smooth cut often, and so I decided to cut a circle out first and use it as a template. So now, if you're thinking, whoa, you're cutting it into a circle, yeah, okay, that is a thing. And if you printed this somewhere special and it was worth a couple dollars of printing, I get it. I printed this on my computer. I have good photo paper, I have a good printer, and I have an ink program where I can print 500 pages a month. So for me, if I mess this up, I can go print another one. So it's not, if you're going, oh, don't do it, that's where I'm at with it, okay? So I'm going to add this on here, and I'm trying to figure out what the best way is. I think I'm just going to add some adhesive right to this. If you can hear my dogs barking in the background, I'm sorry about that. There's not a whole lot I can do, unfortunately. I'm going to go ahead and just trim off the bottom because I don't want quite so much. And then, see if I can get this centered on there. I'm going to lightly tap it so that if I need to pull it back up, yeah, it looks like I got his, I was trying to make sure I got his head from underneath. So I'm going to trim that out to start with so that I know I'm happy with it. Circles are one of my favorite things to include on layouts. If you go flip through my Instagram page, you will see that I just have circles and big circles on every few layouts. I'd say at least 1 out of 10, if not 1 out of 5. I use big circles or some kind of circular design to it. And that's just a personal preference. They're pleasing to my eye. I like how they look in the end. So I gravitate that direction for sure. So now you can see I've got that first part on there. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add this on there. And the decision I need to make is, do I want vertical or horizontal? I think I'm going to stick with this simply because I don't want crooked lines down here. So that will prevent crooked horizontal lines anyway. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get that on there, and I can tighten up that adhesive in just a little bit here, but this is just really trying to get the start going. So one thing that I know I wonder about for a lot of people is, do you have a very specific plan when you go into a layout? Or do you just kind of sit down and see where things go? And that is my question for you today. I'd love to hear, do you have a specific plan and approach to your scrapbooking when you sit down and you know exactly what you're going to do? Or are you kind of flying by the seat of your pants? I honestly, most of the time, am flying by the seat of my pants. However, today I did plan things out because I'm live with you, so I wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing and wasn't sitting here fumbling around. Okay, so can you see how cool that looks? Just a really neat added element. Now, I am not going to glue this down today because I do want to consider if I might want a small white circle behind this, or if I'm going to do some cutting and pull these leaves to go over the top. So I'm not going to commit to it yet, but you will see in the next couple days how it progresses. But you can see what a cool effect that had just by taking this paper that's ready-made. There's very little you have to do to it, and just cutting a big circle and adding to it. Okay, my final layout for today that we're going to start is this one that we talked about yesterday again, that I just really liked how the paper looked with this specific picture. So this one's going to get a little more complicated. As I said in the beginning, I'm going to start simple and go from there. So I've got my picture. I need to matte that. I almost always matte my pictures on white just because it gives a nice clean finish to things. And it also helps it pop even more against patterned papers. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to just completely mess with this paper, I guess is just the best way to put it. I cut off, as you saw, the Call of the Wild thing. I'm going to create kind of similar to what I did here. This was actually all patterned paper that was put together. I'm going to mess around with the patterned paper and make it work in a different way for me. And so I'm not going to be super detailed about my what we call fussy cutting here, but I am going to go around and trim some things, and I may go back and get more detailed later. But right now I'm going for kind of more of an impressionist look instead of a realistic look. If you're artistic at all, you know what I mean by that. I'm going for a Monet look a little bit, where it's stepping away from reality and giving you kind of a blurred reality look on it. And that's kind of a funny thing to do with a layout that has a photorealistic background. So, you know, if I was doing this on my own time, I would really be going slowly and cutting more carefully, etc. As I said, I'll probably do that off camera, trim things accordingly. Right now I'm just kind of trying to get this part out of the way. Just a good pair of fine-tipped scissors will help you with this. Yes, I will definitely be going back and cleaning this up and getting the edges a little tighter later. Okay, so I'm going to just set this at the bottom. Now, where I'm really going to get crazy here is I am going to trim this out. And this is a little easier. It's a little easier to follow those mountain and cloud lines. Just keep kind of trimming, creating a puzzle, if you will, to put back together. Again, you can approach this several different ways you can get really complicated with your base. You can add cut files and back those cut files. You can add stitching. You can add mixed media. Whatever is really within your style is fair game. And even if it's not in your style, try it out. See if you like it. Okay, so I'm going to get some repositionable adhesive. So this is adhesive that will allow me to pull back up anything that I want to pull back up later. And that way I can trim, but I want you to see also how it's kind of coming together. And this is from Scrapbook Adhesives by 3L. They have a whole bunch of different runners that you can use that range from permanent, which is what I was using earlier to map my photo, to repositionable, which I don't use a repositionable a ton, but when I do need it, it's a really helpful thing to have. Okay, so this next one, and part of what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull up my edges a little bit to create some interesting dimension. You can just see, literally, I'm just grabbing it with my fingernails and pulling things up. Okay, then do the same thing again. I'm putting it on. Oh shoot, I just did that one with permanent. Okay, we're gonna just hope for the best on that one. I'll deal with that later on. Now you can see it does create, by pulling up, I've got some white space in there. So I want to tuck it under a little bit more than it actually fit, like initially would have fit. And I'll figure that out later, okay? If I want to pull that back up and tuck some extra little pieces underneath, I will. Okay, so then this is my next piece, repositionable. And there's a lot of fun things you can do with photoreal paper like this. I consider doing it, cutting it into squares and creating a square mosaic. The sky's the limit. Don't just think about, oh, I have to put it on there exactly how it looks, because you definitely do not. Okay, and let me pull this up a little bit again. One of the things I love about scrapbooking is that you get papers like this that you can just look at and go, so what in the world am I going to do with that? In fact, I literally have people say to me, what are you going to do with that paper? And I'm like, yeah, I have no idea, but we'll see. We'll see. And this is actually my favorite part of the creating process, because I love to see what you can do with just straight up paper. How can you make it different and interesting and unique? So that is, yeah, like that's literally the thing I enjoy. The part of the process that I enjoy the most is just taking a paper and saying, what can I do with this that maybe no one else has thought of yet? Okay. So you can see I've gotten condensed enough that my tree goes a lot taller, but it's not a big deal. Okay. Like this one, I'm not going to put this on right now, but you can see I would put that back there just to cover up some of that white. Oh, that's what the problem was. Hold on. The beauty of repositionable stuff. I forgot about this layer. I gotta set this one aside. I keep grabbing the wrong one. The nice thing too with this adhesive is if I go like that, I can just rub it off. So if I get it on my actual layout, no biggie. Let's see, how did this fit on there? There we go. Didn't think that last one fit quite right. Now we'll put it back on there. Okay, and you can see already how that's creating just some really interesting dimension. And then I'll put my final piece on there. Okay, so you can see how I totally changed the look of that. Now, I dropped that in there, and I've got just a really different, unique approach to this actual page than what I started with. And gives you just a different way to think about things. So real quick before I go, I just want to point out the bases, some of the different bases from yesterday. And again, like where I started at before getting to the next level. And then all three of these layouts, you'll see we will continue for the rest of the week. We'll get titles, we'll get embellishments, we'll get them all put together. So this one I already showed you. You can see my base was built with patterned papers. I added all these waves first, then I added my picture, and then I went from there. Got a couple other ones that are kind of interesting. So like this one, you can see the circle idea started in the same way that that pink one earlier started. I put that circle on there and I went from there. This one actually has some mixed media on it. So I started with this dotted paper and I wanted to cover some of it up so that I had a good spot where my title would still show. So I actually used some white gesso and just did white gesso down here so that it was still white. But if you look really closely, you can see that there are dots coming through. Okay, here's the circle thing again. You can see this one I actually did stitching around my circle, then I added a white circle, then I built my flowers, and then I went from there, okay? Knowing with what picture, knowing with what pattern papers I wanted to work, but building up from there. The only other one, this one, was the one I was kind of referencing earlier, where I started with a whole bunch of stitching. So I sat down, punched the holes, and started doing string art with this star. And then I built up from there. So starting with your base is a really easy way to get things rolling. And as I mentioned earlier, a sketch is always an easy way to get started. Definitely, if you are getting started, check out the sketches. This one, as I said, is from Creative Scrapbooker magazine. They have a sketch group here on Facebook that you can find. It's called, I believe, Let's Get Sketchy. I will link it up down below in the comments because I try and participate in that as much as I can. And also Sketch and Scrap, which I've misplaced that sketch at the moment. But Sketch and Scrap is another great one, and I will link you to that down below too, to use to get started, and just a great jumping off point. So I will answer all your questions down below now that we're through the video, and we'll be back tomorrow when we will begin working on the titles and taking the next step. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you tomorrow at 10.